I did not even stop to eat. I just drove through. And so I'm driving, and I get out of South Carolina, and my GPS, I'm following my GPS on the phone, and it says, get off the interstate, turn here, and I did. And I'm on this road, and then it says, go 2 miles and make a left, and I did. And it said, go 3 miles and make a right. And next thing you know, I'm out in the middle of the woods. And I'm just following the route on the GPS, and I'm looking at the gas tank. It's going down, down, down. And it's like there's no cars for 15 miles. I could do like 100 on these roads if I wanted, but I'm in the South. I know better. So I'm driving along, and every light year was a Baptist church. And I'm thinking, I am so lost. If my phone loses juice, I will never find my way out of Georgia. And then it occurred to me, they filmed Deliverance here. Sorry. Christianity's changing. Phyllis Tickle, who's a feminist theologian, says that Christianity changes every 500 years. It goes through a major transformation. Not exactly on the year 500, of course, but around the year 500, Christianity went from being a illicit religion established legally under Constantine, which was not a good thing for the church, into a great decline as you moved into the early Middle Ages, before there would be a robust growth between the years 500 and 1000. And around the year 1000, the medieval church got all excited because, hey, 1,000 years had passed. That's a millennium. That means Jesus is coming back. And there were big changes in Christianity around the year 1000. And 500 years later, a German monk named Martin Luther decided to take on the Catholic Church in a debate about penance, nailed theses to a church door. Bada boom, bada bing, we had the Reformation. Well, right now, today, we're on the verge of another change. Look, I'm not a Pentecostal. I don't believe in the God's doing a new thing. Like God's got Alzheimer's or something. What did I do last year? I forget. I think I'll do something new this year. The gospel's the gospel. And it has the same effect around the world in every culture and every time. It's not as though God is doing a new thing. It's that we're finally starting to get what God has always done. So here we are, and Christianity is changing. Right now in the theological world, the world in which I work, the academic world, with the scholars that read Greek and Latin and Hebrew and Aramaic, and they study the early church fathers, they study the medieval scholastics, they study the Reformation thinkers, they study the great theologians today, the global theologians, the Korean theologians, the Japanese theologians, the South African theologians, Australia, you name it. There are incredible theological thinkers on every continent doing some fantastic work in all of their cultures. And in North America, we white males have had a hegemony on theology for so long that when the 1960s happened and everybody was smoking pot, well, theology changed too, because now women had a voice. And we have feminist theology. And that's important because men, white males, we tend to think that we know everything. And we don't. And then we have black theology, and then the African-American women looked at their black men and said, hey, man, we're women, we don't do thinking like you, and so we have womanist theology. And then you have Latino theology. And then the women, the Hispanic women said, hey, we're not men, and you have Latina theology. And you could go on down the road. There are so many voices out there right now doing theological work. It is the most exciting time to be a theologian, right? I couldn't begin to tell you what a thrill it is. In the course of my 40 years of doing this, I'm 58, and I started this business at 18. I have never been so excited about what is happening with Christianity. It's dying. And I'm a chaplain by the bedside of Christianity while it's dying, and I'm not trying to heal it because God hasn't called me to do that. My job is to comfort it while it dies. It's okay. You've done your work. You've done your job. It's okay to die. And it is. Rene Girard, the Stanford professor who perhaps has had more influence on my own work than anybody else, has said Christianity is the only religion that predicts its own demise. And the fact is, what we are seeing today is the death of a 2,000-year-old religion. And it's the best thing that will ever happen to the planet. Because unless a grain of seed falls into the ground and dies, it abides alone and it cannot bear fruit. But when it dies, it brings forth much fruit. And the same is true of religion, the Christian religion. Now, I need to say this. I'm pretty bold, I'll be frank, and you don't have to like what I say, you don't have to believe what I say, and that's all good because nobody made me Pope yet. I grew up Roman Catholic, so I still have aspirations. I grew up with smells and bells. Anybody grew up Roman Catholic? You know, I love smells and bells. I still love the Mass. I still read Catholic theology. For me, it's very, very important. But Christianity was never meant to exist. Jesus did not come to establish the church. Jesus did not even think about the church. It never entered his Jewish mind. This is all later stuff that gets added to the tradition. Jesus' mission and purpose in life was not to die on a cross to save souls. You're sitting there and you're going, but wait. I've always been taught that. I'm going to grant you've always been taught that. It's essential for religion to get you to think that the purpose of Jesus, of God sending the Son into the world, was to die on a cross for your sins. And we call this the gospel. And then if we're Calvinists, we add to this and we say, and God was pouring his wrath out on Jesus on the cross because God needs blood. And a God that needs blood is a vampire. And we start freaking out. It's like, wait a second. I go to church. I've been a Baptist or a Methodist or a Lutheran or an Episcopalian or a Catholic or a Pentecostal or a charismatic or a charismaniac. It don't matter. I've been told God needs blood. Tonight and tomorrow night, I am going to make the case. I hope I can make the case in 2 short talks. I've written tons of books and articles and essays and that you can check out. But the argument is this. Jesus came to show us that Papa does not require sacrifice in order to love us. There are only 2 axiomatic statements. I use big words. I apologize. My bad. There are only 2 statements in the New Testament where the word is has God on one side of the equation and a noun on the other. And one of them is God is love. And the other one is God is light. Those are the only 2 statements in the New Testament with reference to God where God's being, as it were, is identified with a quality or a characteristic. Now, I want to tell you how most people frame or create their doctrine of God. So you grow up in the church, you go to Sunday school, you're a little kid, and you're told all these things about God, and you're reading the Old Testament stories about God, and then you come to the New Testament, and you've been, learning all along, God is this violent God, and he's a warrior God, and he kills the Amalekites and the Gibeonites and the Jebusites and anybody else that has an ITE at the end of their name. You're supposed to laugh. That's funny. Okay, so anyway, and then you got Jesus, and Jesus comes in. It's gentle Jesus, meek and mild, keeper of the status quo. And Jesus is a nice guy, and he's really nice. He hangs out with fishermen and prostitutes and tax collectors. And then the shift occurs. Violent God, nice Jesus in his ministry, but then he's coming back at the end of time with all kinds of wrath, grapes of wrath, where he's going to tread the winepress, and we're going to have the Terminator mixed with Rambo on steroids. So what did I do as I'm driving through South Carolina and Georgia today? I did something I haven't done in 30 years. I listened to Christian radio. You know what's funny? 30 years ago when I listened to Christian radio, and today when I listen to Christian radio, nothing had changed. Nothing had changed. It was the same shtick. I heard Jimmy Swaggart today. Man, I thought he was gone. And I'm listening to the, and I'm flipping through. There's, now back in my day there was one Christian radio station, and now there's like 300. You just flip the radio dial and you got and every last one of them is teaching about Papa. That's who Jesus called God. Jesus never calls God God. You know this. He uses the Aramaic term Abba, which is a term of both intimacy and respect. It's the first word a child learns, and it's the same term you use for the elders that sit at the village gate. And these preachers are talking about Papa, and all I'm doing the whole time is I'm talking and I'm saying, Lord, not for nothing here, but this is blasphemy, what they're saying about you. They're turning you into an ogre. They are turning you into something out of a horror movie. And when your God is more like Satan than Jesus, you've got a problem. This is the problem of the Christian religious tradition. It really doesn't matter if you're Roman Catholic, if you're Pentecostal, Lutheran, Episcopalian, or whatever. Christianity has become a religion. You go to college, you take a world religion course, you learn about Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Judaism, Taoism, and Christianity. It's a world religion. The one thing it was never meant to be. Jesus did not come to establish a religion. I often wonder sometimes, he's been sitting at the Father's right hand in our understanding for 2,000 years, and I sometimes wonder about their conversations. Does Jesus ever look over and say, Papa, look what they've done in our name? I wonder. And then I remember that the writer to the Hebrews has this conversation going on between the Father and the Son before the incarnation. And in Hebrews chapter 10, Hebrews is a fantastic book, and most people are going to read the book of Hebrews and say, oh, Jesus is God's sacrifice. They're missing what this writer's doing. This writer's actually subverting the concept of sacrifice because he changes the language. He doesn't use the Greek term for sacrifice, thousia. He uses the term for offering. Pharaoh, diaphero, prosphero, anaphero, and its cognates. And Jesus doesn't offer, the high priest, Jesus doesn't offer something else. He offers himself. And the whole concept of sacrifice gets subverted in that letter. And by the time you get to chapter 9, you have this phrase, and it says, without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sin. How many of you have heard that text? You know it, don't you? And you know what? Whenever people quote that text, they omit the words that are right before it. According to the law, there is no shedding of blood without the forgiveness of sin. And it is this law, this Torah, this sacrificial religion that has been critiqued for chapter 7, 8, 9, and 10. But they don't pay attention to that. And so they read Hebrews through this religious lens, these religious eyes, and everything stays the same. Have you ever wondered why it is pastors come out of seminary or they get anointed in the church, however they get to the pulpit. There are many ways to a pulpit. And every last one of them thinks they're doing a new thing. Oh, they're going to change the world. I remember when I was in seminary in the 1980s, we were so eager to get out. We were going to change the world. It was our preaching that was going to make all the difference. Every one of us. And we took these little churches, and we became little demigods because we were the experts. Anybody know what this is? This is my Bible. This is what I read. You can come up here for me and just read me a verse, please? Any verse will do. Just read me a verse. What's the problem? It's all Greek to him. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. It's all Greek to me, too. And you get out of seminary, you go, I've got all this knowledge. I'm going to change the world. And you know what's funny? Nothing changes. I mean, we're in 2015. Go back to 2005. Has Christianity impacted the world any more in the last 10 years than it did 10 years ago? Go back to 1995. Any change? Not. How about 1985? Disco? Nope. 75? Nope. 65. Yeah. So the point I'm making is you could do this all night long. What we've done is we've taken this message of Jesus about his Papa, who his Papa is, how his Papa reigns in our life, not as a tyrant, not as an ogre, not, as I heard on the radio today, as a despot who's only interested in his own glory. I am the Lord God, and you must glorify me. I mean, if God is that egotistical, he needs to see us shrink. I don't do that to my own granddaughters, and they live in my house, If I walked around the house going, you need to give me some glory, I know what they would say. In the same way, Jesus' message is not about a tyrant, bloodthirsty, vampiric, alcoholic God in the sky that when you pray, you just hope he ain't been drinking. Jesus' Papa is the one who nurtures, is merciful, is compassionate, is gentle, is loving all the way, brings hope, brings life, creates peace, reconciles, restores relationships. This is Jesus' Papa. Jesus' Papa is not Judge Judy. And you listen to some of these Christian preachers and you'd swear to God that, God has taken lessons from Judge Judy. It ain't the case. So, we today live on the verge of a transformation. And it doesn't matter whether you're conservative or whether you're liberal, whether you're Catholic or whether you're Protestant, whether you're charismatic or whether you're cessationist. It really doesn't matter. Christianity is changing all around you. Now, you can either accept that and say, Lord, there's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. Some of you get that. But something's happening here. And it's hard for me to let go of my childhood faith. But I'm going to do it. There's a strange story in the Gospel of John where Jesus, after he feeds the multitudes, he begins to say this really strange thing. And if you're a Jew, it's a really obscene thing that he says. In fact, I would have to use a lot of swear words to really offend you, to give you the power of the text. But if you're a Jew and you have another Jew saying, unless you eat my body, you can have no part of me. Unless you drink my blood. Now, friends, I don't know about you, but I'm not into cannibalism. You know, my granddaughters love The Walking Dead. I don't mind a zombie movie now and then, but it's not something I want to do. And when Jesus says you have to eat my flesh, if I'm a first century Jew, I am just going to be going, that ain't right. And the text says that the multitudes left him. Here's Jesus, just fed 5,000 people, man. Free McDonald's. Here you go. Lunch. And then he says, you got to eat me too. And they leave. And what does Jesus say? I mean, he's sad. He's disappointed. I'm not trying to attribute feelings to him, but I do try to imagine at that point what it felt like to lose half a congregation. And Jesus says, are you going to go too? Simon, are you going to leave me? Thaddeus, did I offend you? Matthew, do these words bother you? You guys going to leave? This is Jesus. The gospel deconstructs our religion. And Jesus is constantly in the Gospels deconstructing the religious thinking of his Jewish contemporaries. So I want to throw up a text for a moment, have you look at Mark 11 with me, beginning around verse 11. And it's the story that occurs at the end of the Gospel if you're in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and it occurs at the beginning of the Gospel if you're in the Gospel of John. Scholars tend to say it probably occurred at the end, and John has just taken the story and put it at the beginning in order to make a theological point. It doesn't matter to me whether it occurred at the beginning or the end. It occurred. Jesus enters Jerusalem, and he enters the 9th wonder of the world. Now, you know about the 8 wonders of the world, right? Okay? The Lighthouse of Alexandria, the Colossus of Rhodes. These sorts of incredible sculptures or physical structures. Before Jesus was born, Herod, who was only half Jewish, wanted to please the people. And so he began an expansion program on the temple. And that expansion program begins about 25 years before Jesus is born. It's in full swing during Jesus' life. It continues through the early church, and it only ends because Rome comes and destroys the temple. There are 10,000 workmen working every day building Herod's temple. Do you know this? Do you know what kind of labor force 10,000 workers are? Do you know the largest stone in Herod's temple weighed 500 tons? It's over 1 million pounds. How did they get that thing there? It's huge. Herod's temple is like the World Trade Center, the Sears Tower, the tower in Dubai, and your favorite football arena all in one. It's huge. It's massive. It's gilded. It has gates made of Corinthian bronze that they're so tall and so large it takes 20 priests to open one door. That's how big they are. And if you made it up as far where you could see the holy place and the enormous veil that had been sewn, ladies, you know what sewing is like. This thing is 80 feet tall. And it's not like they had Singer sewing machines. And they've got gilded, gold-plated grapevines coming down over this thing. I mean, this thing is luxurious. It's not just a couple of bricks. Jesus comes into this edifice. And he does a prophetic act. Walks over to where the money changers were and starts busting down their tables. Boom, boom, boom. And he's already sat by himself in the corner and woven a whip that he can use on the animals to drive them out of the cages and set them free. In Herod's temple up on the far corner is the Fortress Antonia. And there is a Roman garrison. And whenever there's any problem down in the temple, that Roman garrison comes down and they just start killing people. There's a story about such an event in Luke 13. Josephus has plenty of stories of this kind of event happening. What we have in this act of Jesus coming into the temple, turning over the tables, whipping the animals so that they would come out of their cages, come out of their stalls, is an act of extraordinary hubris or extraordinary prophecy. You see, for Jesus, God was not about the business that is taking place up here on the altars, where there is a line of priests that are bringing the sacrifices up, slitting the throats, cutting up the parts, handing out the parts to the different attendants where they need to go, burning fat, burning incense, burning organs. Have you ever been to a slaughterhouse? You need to imagine the gold and the beautiful tapestries mingled with the smell of death. This is not who Jesus Papa is. Jesus comes in and he looks at this place and he says, my Father can't be here. I mean, look at this place. It's all about death. It's about blood. It's gory. It's about priests who are getting fat off the meat. Who gets the meat of the sacrifices? The people? No, not unless it's Passover. The priests get the meat. And in a culture where you have a 92, 93% illiteracy rate, in a culture where poverty runs as high as 85 and 90%, I mean day labor poverty, where it's not about where your next paycheck comes from, it's about whether you're going to eat tomorrow. And you come into this religious institution, and the priests are getting fat. And by the way, there's only 4 families in Jerusalem that supply the leadership of the temple, the high priest, the captain of the guard, and these kinds of things. All the other priests, they come from around the countryside. They do their 2-week stint in the temple, and they're cleaning up guts and cleaning up garbage and, swathing away blood and doing all the chores. They got the dirty work. And the 4 priestly families, they made a mint. They were kind of like the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs and the Donald Trumps, in terms of the wealth. I'll give you an example. If you took the total accumulated assets of the richest 300 people in the world today, 300, put all their wealth together, it's worth more than the bottom 3 billion people on the planet. You with me on this? Same in Jesus' day. Money flows up, not down. And Jesus looks at this system of religion, the system where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. He looks at this system that's all about God manipulating this this blood and guts and sacrifice. And Jesus says, that's not my papa. My Father's house was meant to be a house of prayer, where you could just come and say, thank you, Lord. Thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for my family. Thank you for letting me breathe breaths of air. Thank you for the blood that runs in my veins. Thank you for, whatever. But instead it got turned into a commercial marketplace. Well, is that any different than Christianity? You know what I'm saying here? Look, I'm not against the church as an institution. There's enough folks, you might even hear my friends Jeff and Caleb talk this way. They're young, though, so show them some mercy. I'm not against pastors making a living. Laborers worthy of their hire and all that. What I am against is somebody getting up in front of their congregation and their internet audience saying, God wants me to have a $65 million jet. There's something wrong with that. We need a cleansing of the temple today. We need a deconstruction of the Christian religion. We need to stop supporting an institution whose sole purpose is to bleed us dry. I get angry. At one point in this, I get angry at church all the time. When I'm in church all the time, I get angry at bad preaching. But I really get angry when ministers shame the congregation into giving. Happened in my home church recently, and I was angry. Nobody should ever be shamed into giving. You understand this? And if your pastor shames you into giving, you just need to leave. Right? As Stan said, give because you can or because you want to. Or because Jesus says, hey, you can do it. Do not give because somebody says you have to. There are no shoulds or oughts in the gospel. Just as there are no ifs, ands, or buts. Luther was here 500 years ago. And one of the things Luther tried to teach us was there are no ifs, ands, or buts. And do you know, even before he died, Lutheranism arose and it had ifs, ands, and buts. Go figure. Sometimes you try to do the right thing and, yeah. So Jesus is in the temple and he does this prophetic act, and it's like in a corner of the temple. I mean, it's not as though Jesus is really trying to shut the temple down, because if he did that, then we would have had the guards come down and there would have been a slaughter. He's doing this prophetic act. And what he's trying to say to his contemporaries is, this beautiful edifice that you all love, that you all come to, that you all think God is at, and you all are expecting God to come and do what God does, this whole thing is not who Papa is. You want to know where Papa is? Go out into the fields. Look at the lilies. See how they grow. Look at their colors. Herod has never been dressed so fine as these lilies. You want to know where Papa is? He's not in the birds and the doves and the pigeons in the cages. Go out into the meadow. Look at the sparrows. They neither sow nor reap. And yet it's your Papa that takes care of them and feeds them. What we've done for 2,000 years, and I mean, if you wanted, I could sit and give you the whole history lesson and do all the footnoting and stuff, but I do that in my books. What we've done is we've taken a message about this gracious, restorative, reconciliatory God whose heart is love, whose only countenance is light. And we've turned this God into a mess. The way I describe it's like this. If you ask most Christians to describe God to you, they have what I call the suitcase God. You take your suitcase and you put the word God on it. Unzip it, bzzz, open it up. Now, I want you to shout out to me so I can repeat it for the internet people. I want you to shout out some nouns and adjectives that you have heard preachers say belong to God. I'll give you a couple to start off. You ready? Omnipresent. Holy. Give me some more. Omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, righteous, gracious, all-powerful, holy, just. You name it. You put those adjectives and nouns in that suitcase, zip it up, and what do you got? A doctrine of God. You think I'm kidding. Go read the Westminster Catechism of 1647, which is the dominant catechism of Calvinism in the United States. And it starts off, God is omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, holy, righteous, just. It's this whole list. And then at the end it says, and wrathful against those who will not obey his rules. And do you know, not one time do you get the noun Jesus. So you know what I tell people? You want a doctrine of God? Take whatever you think you know, unzip the suitcase, empty it out. Get rid of all this baggage. It's doing you no good. Put the name Jesus in the suitcase, zip it back up, and you got a doctrine of God. Jesus has come to end our religion and to bring us the gospel and to bring us to faith and to restore our relationships with each other. There's an important ethical component in this that gets missed in the grace preachers like Joseph Prince and others. They don't pay any attention to that part of Jesus' message that you count and that your relationships count and that Jesus has come to heal your relationships. No, they spend all their time. Jesus wants to heal you of cancer. He wants to heal your pain. Anybody in pain? Hallelujah. Well, I'm going to heal pain here tonight. Boom, 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 boom. Never mind that most people have pain in their body because they have pain in their heart. Jesus comes to heal our relationships, husbands and wives, parents, children, neighbors, co-workers, church members. Imagine that. And this is part of this business of what he's bringing to us. And so, for me, a genuine form of Christianity that is non-religious in character is going to be a place where, yeah, you know what? If I'm here and Stan and I have a bit of a brouhaha, well, you know what? I'm here, and I got to work this thing out. I just have to, and so does Stan. We got to work it out because we're brothers together in the family of God, you know. Instead, what you get is marketplace Christianity. You sit in the pew, you listen to somebody, you don't like it, you get up and leave and find the other church where you'll last about 3 minutes because you carry your baggage with you. Hey, I'm having issues with our new pastors at our church. I am. I'm on live TV here. I hope they ain't watching. Because I got to go work it out when I get back home off this tour, you know. I do. I mean, I respect them. And I got to work things out. Just like I had to work out my marriage after I had an affair. Just like I had to work out my relationships with my daughters after I'd come home after drinking a bottle of scotch every night. One bottle of scotch every night, And, of course, that doesn't make for being a good dad. The restoration of our relationships, that's the gospel. Religion doesn't give a damn about restoring relationships. Religion only cares about keeping you in fear and keeping you under the thumb of somebody else. Now, I've just put up on Facebook, and this is funny, I'm a troublemaker on Facebook because I try to teach theology on Facebook. Some of my Facebook followers are in the audience here tonight, I don't know, because they've come and introduced themselves to me, and I create trouble out there, don't I? I just put up a post that said, a servant has no authority. And if someone claims to be an authority in your life, they're not serving you. Because my argument's against these charismatic preachers that I'm the pastor, I'm going to provide your covering, I'm going to be your umbrella. And I'm just going, that's a crock of you know what. A servant has no authority. I have no authority over you, man. None. I'm just a guy. I just like to study and read, and I've spent 40 years doing it, and I have ideas, and I'm not going to tell you, God told me. I'm not that stupid. Even if I hear the voice of Papa in my life, it's for me, not for you. I'll tell you, what pastors who are all into authority, what they really ought to have is their worship song is the Rolling Stones, Under My Thumb. That's what they need to be singing. But who needs a God like that? I don't need a God like that. I don't need a God that's up there that I have to be afraid of. I don't need it. Look, man, I grew up with a mom like that. I love her. She's with Jesus. The day she died, I didn't shed a tear. I just looked up and said, Papa, she's yours now, man. And I know she's singing. I know she was a broken woman. She was a broken woman. She'd been abused as a child. God bless her. She's up there singing in some choir somewhere because she loved to sing. I know that. But she was a tyrant. We weren't allowed to have feelings as children. We were told how to feel. Do you know, I didn't have feelings until a few years ago. Don't kid yourself. My wife for 38 years, for 35 of those years, she would say, I love you, honey. Of course, I know how to do it. I love you too, sweetie. I know the words. I love you too, babe. I know how to say, I never felt the feeling until a few years ago. One day, she said to me, I love you, Michael Hardin. And by God, there was like a flicker of a feeling. It was like, what's this? This is true. I don't need a God that extinguishes me, that demands that Michael Hardin cease to exist so that God can be exalted. I need a Papa that's going to be in a relationship with me, like we sang earlier, that's going to walk with me as a friend. That's going to treat me as a human being, not as a piece of meat. And this is what's happening today in the theological world, in the biblical studies world, in churches all around the planet, and in this church. God came here, blew his breath, and the chaff's gone. What remains are the kernels of wheat. And you all will fall into the ground and die together, and that will produce serious fruit. Jesus stood on the meadow that day and said, are my words too hard for you? You gonna leave me? Are you afraid of what happens when you lose your religion? Are you so afraid? And most of the crowd said, yeah, this is what we grew up with, Jesus. And if we have to choose between you and our religion, well, we'll choose our religion. I am thankful that Jesus did not quit. I am thankful Jesus did not look up and say, you know, Papa, this isn't working out. I think I'm just going to go get a job and be a baker. I am thankful he kept his eyes focused on caring for the poor and the widows and the broken down day laborers, that he continued to speak truth to power. I am grateful that he kept on in spite of those who walked away. And so today, Jesus comes into our midst and invites us to follow him. He invites us to eat his flesh, drink his blood. He invites us to learn to turn the other cheek and love the enemy, to bless those who curse us. I mean, to really bless them. And it's hard to do. It's hard to do. When somebody looks at you and says, I hate you, to say, man, I just ask God's richest blessing for you. I don't know what to do. I can't restore this thing. I can't do it, but I'm going to ask God to bless you. That's hard to do, man. Heck, it's hard to do in a marriage. To live without religion is to live without fear and to live in hope. Well, I think I've said enough for tonight, I reckon. So I'll wait until the other part to tomorrow night, and we'll have some more time together.